Hello everybody, my name is Arston the Unclean, but you might know me better as Arston the Unclean from the Arston the Unclean news show. Just wanted to take a second to tell you that tonight's episode is a really special one, and I don't recommend watching it alone. This is an important message that needs to go out to everybody, so make sure you tell your friends and your family to watch this incredibly long episode. And this episode comes from the heart of the entire cast and crew of the Arston the Unclean news show. So I hope you got your snack of choice, be it popcorn or pretzels if that's really how you choose to live your life. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this very special episode. So alright, let's do this thing. Do 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 do. Number 10. White culture. If there's one thing I can count on in life, it's when social media influencers, streamers, YouTubers, TikTokers, Rumble, Bumblers, bitch shooters, and those two people who still use Daily Motion constantly remind me that as a white man, I have no culture. And before you say anything, no. 2% milk and Matlock are not contributions to white culture, which is why we need to listen to all the blacks, the yellows, the reds, and the white apologists when they remind me that my family history and historical lineage have no meaning and ultimately no culture. Which pisses me right the hell off when I find out that the World Economic Forum pulled out all the stops to get this magical duo to come in and finally make a contribution to white culture. So just sit back, soak it all in, and savor. We waited generations for this, folks. Number 9. Pac-Man journalism. For those of you who didn't grow up back in the day when back in the day actually meant something, Ms. Pac-Man is a cautionary tale about what happens when a bunch of fat-phobic ghosts decide to harass a plus-sized Asian birthing person with an eating disorder. But it looks like nobody decided to tell the anchors of Rebel News about this game because they were relentlessly harassing Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla all over the streets of Davos, demanding answers over a certain medical procedure that shall remain nameless.
You've made millions on the backs of people's entire livelihoods. How does that feel to walk the streets as a millionaire? What about the sudden deaths?
What do you have to say about young men?
No apologies, sir.
Do you think you should be charged criminally for some of the criminal behavior you've obviously been a part of?
How much money have you personally made?
Is that it?
Come on, upstairs.
Shame on you, sir.
Hey Rebel News, I hear if you give the guy a quarter, he might let you try again from the beginning. Who am I kidding? With inflation the way it is right now, it's gonna cost you at least $6 to get that game running again. Number 8. Send in the Clown World Army. There's nothing that makes me feel warmer and safer than to know that in a world that's imploding with war, multiple border crises, economic collapse, food shortages, and authoritarian governments that are systematically stripping the rights away from normal everyday citizens, that the Swiss government has their priorities straight by dispatching 5,000 army troops to protect some of the richest douche whores on the planet. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, mostly benevolent but somewhat violent asshole terrorists are bombing the streets, destroying businesses, and fighting against a police force that is losing funding by the day. They're also getting a sloppy wet kiss from the media in the form of somewhat positive coverage by calling their wanton acts of terror and destruction as mostly peaceful. And the only thing that really bothers me about this is when Antifa burns down a city, it's a mostly peaceful protest. But if I burn down the head of my HOA's tool shed, I get arrested for arson because I refuse to mow my lawn. I swear to Christ, there's no justice in this world. Number 7. Twitter's not a private company. It just can't do whatever it wants. Remember back when Twitter was a private company that was beyond reproach and was allowed to silence a sitting president because they conspired with the federal government to control the narrative and prevent people to freely express their thoughts and opinions? Well, everything was fine until that stinko pinko Elon Musk swooped in, dropped a deuce in the punch bowl, ate all of the cake, and decided that everybody was entitled to voice their thoughts on the internet. It was too much to ask the users to just ignore the stuff they didn't like or disagreed with, so it looks like the UN has finally decided to grow a sack of balls and is coming in to save all of us from the threat of a company that is not bound to any government entity.
So our message was clear. We have the rules which have to be complied with, and otherwise there will be sanctions.
Haha! Elon Musk is probably pissing in his boots right now, scared shitless over what the UN is gonna do in response to his free speech absolutism. Just imagine all of the laws and illegal content that this bastard is committing simply by owning a social media platform. I simply cannot wait to see the UN sanctions against Twitter for all of the apparent hate speech they're assuming he's supporting. Just a second, how is an unelected government bureaucracy supposed to sanction a social media platform based in the US?
I don't know.
Number 6. Constitutional inconveniences. I've been a long supporter of the idea that
freedom of speech
is a murky and unclear definition of how we're supposed to express our thoughts in a society that frowns on us expressing our thoughts. Why is it that the United States Constitution doesn't clearly state what constitutes as internet hate speech? I thank the science every morning that we have a Congress that can circumvent the Constitution by colluding with tech companies to censor political rivals. They also use perverted loopholes to allow the ATF to strip people of their rights to own firearms. If the Founding Fathers were so great, then answer me this. How come they couldn't write the First Amendment to cover internet hate speech and the second to keep people from owning assault weapons of war with bullet magazine clips that hold more than 4 9mm bullet rounds? And how can you really be surprised when you take a look at the Founding Fathers? I mean, look at this painting. They don't care about diversity and inclusion. There's not a single Chinese in that group, and that's clearly fat phobia. It's times like this we should look to more cultured and refined countries to look to our solutions, and so we could all take a collective sigh of relief knowing that the EU is already foreshadowing what our government is plotting to do against us.
Hate speech, as illegal hate speech, which you will have soon also in the US.
Yup, much like that Avatar sequel, you cannot escape. The crushing of the First Amendment and your right to think for yourself is coming to a dictatorship near you. Hey, wait a second. Do mine eyes deceive me? Well, look who it is. Brian Stelter. What's a sexy-ass sperm sponge like you doing in a place like Davos? Because as we already know, that tight little mouth and bunghole's only good for one thing. Number 5. Pimpin'. What's the happy hap all my sexual freaks out there? Christmas may have ended, but I'm still dropping my presence of sexual desire all the way up yo chimney hole. Been training up that slut Brian Stelter for the last 6 months. Had him chained up in a scummy basement, letting all sorts of unspeakable things happen to every single hole in his body. And as a connoisseur of the filth, I can tell you that he loved every single minute of that loving. I even found me some specialized tools, and I can personally say that Brian Stelter's all stretched out and ready for some action of the octogenarian fashion. So when Klaus Schwab sent me a money order for 37 dead Washingtons, I knew it was time to set my baby free for one of his finest performances yet. That slutty hoe all greased up and ready to slut himself out to the entire population of Davos for the low, one-time only price of $3.50 a squirt. And you know all them rich bitches got their money's worth. Now don't you worry about a thing, baby doll. Stelter's gonna be walking them streets as soon as the fissures in his asshole scar over so he can walk straight. Just be forewarned, he might not be as tight as he used to be, so I'm gonna play the pimp with a heart of gold and toss y'all factory discount of 17% for the first 7 minutes of sexual pleasure. I'll even have the bottle of Listerine ready for you afterwards, but trust me, it ain't gonna be for your mouth. Number 4. The metaverse. That's still a thing? I have been a faithful internet user for at least the last 6 months, and I can honestly say as a legal adult that the internet is full of people who want to hurt my feelings, and that makes me feel unsafe. Granted, I could be a mature adult, turn off the internet, go outside, and make a bold attempt to forge a real life with meaningful relationships and activities, but then I'd miss all sorts of ramblings from Keith Olbermann, and that's what makes life worth living. So much like an evil Santa Claus on top of a volcano, Klaus Schwab heard me crying into my waifu body pillow and is sending me a light using something that we all thought was dead and gone.
The Global Collaboration Village is a pioneering effort to use the metaverse for the public good, to create global cooperation and to strengthen global cooperation in the metaverse or using metaverse technologies.
The metaverse. The dumbass idea that Mark Zuckerberg thought of while he was sitting on the toilet and reading the Cliff's Notes to Ready Player One. And let me tell you, this village, it's gonna have everything. It's gonna have coffee shops with all you can play Parcheesi, bakeries that'll sell you blueberry scone emojis, and plenty of fentanyl addicts wandering around the streets for a sense of realism. But don't worry about this quaint little village being unsafe for your children, because Klaus is already paying for the best kind of security money can buy.
One of the village partner, for example, is Interpol. So we work together already with the necessary instances to make sure that the system is as safe as it can be.
And here you were thinking that Interpol was just responsible for apprehending diamond thieves. Well, you guessed wrong, bitch. What better way to protect the people than with a police force that enforces international laws? Hey, didn't the former vice president sign away our sovereignty to an entity of non-elected leaders who will enforce their will via international law in the event of a global pandemic? Nah. Number 3, fixing the climate. Again, if there's one thing a politician gets a raging hard-on for, outside of a Chinese baby, it's talking about how the climate is gonna get hotter and murder everybody in their sleep and bake a bunch of cute kittens into a pie, then steal the candy from the children. So John Kerry, who I legitimately assumed was locked in a cryogenic chamber underneath the Lincoln Memorial, showed up on his private jet and explained to us that fixing the climate is just as simple as Vladimir Zelensky's plan to defeat the entire country of Russia.
So how do we get there? Well, the lesson I've learned in the last years, and I learned it as secretary and I've learned it since, reinforced in spades, is money, 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 money.
Of course! What better way to convince a bunch of filthy rich oligarchs that the only way to fix the climate is by forcing average, everyday people to pay more taxes in order to fund a 4,000-page, $1.7 trillion spending bill that saves the climate by securing the Tunisian border and making sure that Nancy Pelosi gets a building named after her for her decades-long career of being a useless cunt. On a serious note, I would like to offer my sincerest thoughts and prayers to John Kerry, because having a horde of 10,000 murder hornets attack your face second before you take the stage to hypocritically lecture the world on carbon emissions is no laughing matter. And as a self-proclaimed expert, I can tell you that the swelling should go down eventually. Number 2, brain chips. Here's a funny story. Just a few nights ago, I was watching Mom and Dad Save the World, and I was thinking to myself as to why we don't have flying space cars yet. Come to think of it, we don't have anything the movies promised us. We don't have submarine cars, or that Total Recall machine where we get into kick-ass escalator gunfights and can be racist without consequence. And just to add insult to injury, we're 23 years into the century, and we don't even have readily available fuck robots. Yet. But I guess old Klaus heard some of the concerns this year and asked a question that is essential for his plans to take over the world.
Can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to your answers. Is it imaginable?
I think that is imaginable. I think
Brain chips clip. And if we're being perfectly honest here, I wouldn't mind having a brain chip that'll change the channel on my TV for me, because I keep losing the goddamn remote. And since the chip will be powered by my own brain, I don't even have to worry about the batteries anymore. The only drawback is having the government be able to monitor my brain waves and potentially try and control the physical aspects of my body, but yeah, hey, you can't have everything. Number 1. Don't forget about the pandemics. Despite the horrific amounts of disinformed medical misinformation, the CDC is forced to do some studies about how a certain medical treatment might be linked to the increase of stroke-related deaths. Now, there may be some people out there that'll say that this was a medical experiment that governments all over the world tried to force us to take in order to participate in society. But you would be a wrong sack of shit, because that's digital misinformation sold to you by Vladimir Putin and the Russian Ruskies. If anything, we're gonna need more vaccines, because nothing spells trust the experts quite like a CEO of a massive pharmaceutical conglomerate telling you to take mandatory injections. But how do we guarantee compliance with compulsory medical treatments? It's not like you can just ingest a pill that'll magically send a beam into a database that tells it that you complied with their medical tyranny. That's just silly. But there is a simple solution according to Tony Blair. Now remember, Tony Blair was the former British Prime Minister, therefore that makes him a medical expert and worthy of our trust.
You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be there'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure, and many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that.
And considering that Pfizer is artificially mutating COVID in order to preemptively create more vaccines and boosters against an unwilling public, it only makes sense to have a tracking system to make sure that people are doing what they're told. Countries around the globe need to get their ass in gear and start preparing for the next pandemic that Bill Gates has already orchestrated to start in Brazil around the year 2025. And don't worry, because when you're being forced into taking countless injections to earn a hyperinflated digital currency that'll be blocked if you travel too far, eat the wrong things, or say mean things on the internet, you can rest assured that our CEOs, celebrities, and undemocratically elected officials will be flying around in their private jets, eating luxuriously, and taking regular saline injections just to prove that they're willing to pretend that they care. So I guess the moral of the story is that rich people are really bad at hiding their plans for global domination. And despite our meddling, they just might get away with it too. If only Velma didn't murder Scooby-Doo before her cartoon aired. There, you happy now? I did it. The mandatory Velma reference. It's done. You're welcome, Internet. What is up, Mahonies? Arston the Unclean here. Just taking some time to come on by and give you a heartfelt thanks for watching the new video. If you find the World Economic Forum to be both a source of levity and a source of terrifying fear as we sink deeper into a hellscape known as the New World Order, then take my hand and hop aboard the life raft as we ride out the insanity together. And all I ask for admission is a like or a subscribe if you have the time. The comments section has a jar of pennies just waiting for your thoughts. Today's subject is shag carpeting. I would also like to give a heartfelt thanks to Funky here and the Derek O'Shea Show's Zima Brigade for keeping this poor bastard going when times got rough. Thank you all, you magnificent bastards. This episode's for you. And as always, thank you for caring, and I'll see you in the gulag.